Okay, so now I was going to show you the soft select. I've activated it, and the fall off radius, you can have that work by a volume or by surface or global or object, whatever you want. I find that either volume or surface are usually all I need. Okay, and I typically like surface the most, although surface is a little harder on the computer. What surface does is if I increase this, and I switch between volume, you'll see how it selects even more if I go off the volume versus the surface. And I can affect how this works in this graph. Okay, so I can manipulate the object that way. Okay, now the soft select is pretty good. We also have some other deformers, which I need to turn off the soft select real quick. Okay, go back to object mode. Now, we delete history on this thing. Try to avoid any further problems. Okay, now we've got a set of deformers that are really good for modeling purposes. I'm not going to use the hotbox. So if I switch to my animation menu set, I have this create deformers menu, and I've got the first one I'd like to show you is called the lattice. Lattice is really good for changing the overall shape of your object, which is perfect for jack-o'-lanterns, which we are working on. So I can change the number of divisions of the lattice only before I edit it. If I edit the lattice, then I can no longer change those divisions, unless Maya has done something new. Now the lattice, you may say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, it has components that are kind of like vertices. And I can select these, and I can shift around my model. And in fact, I can scale it or rotate it to do anything that I can do with no other components. And then I can manipulate my object. Okay, so I drastically change the shape really fast. Now here's the problem. If I delete this, my mesh is going to go back to how it was. So what do I have to do? I have to select the mesh, go to Edit, Delete by Type History, because that's an input for the mesh. And now it'll be gone, but you have your adjusted model. Isn't it beautiful? Okay. Now I can create other deformers. I'm not going to use my hotbox, sorry. So if I go to Create Deformer, I have a soft modification, and if I have the whole object selected, then it's going to affect the entire object. It's really not affecting it all right now. Well, a lot of times you'll see a manipulator that looks kind of fancy. This is called your universal manipulator, and you can get to it by pressing, like if you were to switch out of it by pressing Y, you could get back to it by pressing T. Okay? Or undoing. Now the universal manipulator often has this little dial icon, the little blue circle, light blue circle with the line in it. If you click that, it will switch which mode your universal manipulator is in. In the case of the soft modification tool, it will show you a red circle, which is the influence area for that soft mod. Click it again, it'll take you back, and then you can manipulate that object with that soft mod based off that amount of influence that you just set. So I can go back, I can shift this down, and then I can translate it over, and I can affect only this part of the geometry, and now I can translate the soft mod and move that part of the geometry around. Soft select most of the time is a better tool for this now. The soft mod is very useful when it comes to rigging, so we may get into that later. So I'm going to hit delete and get rid of it. Now, let's see what else is worth showing you. We have a cluster. So I clustered the entire object, and it's just going to move the entire object. But what's nice, and we'll get into this in greater detail, but we can control where the cluster affects the object by right-clicking on it, on the object, and then going to Paint, Cluster, Cluster Weights. And right now, the entire object is being affected 100% by this cluster. But I can change that by telling it to replace it with 0 in the value. And then if I click on this, I can change my brush size by holding down B and then left clicking and dragging. And I can tell the cluster not to affect that part of the object. So this is also a very useful rigging tool. In fact, a lot of your deformers, you can paint the weights on them. If you've ever wondered how they morph a character from human to, say, werewolf, it's by using a blend shape and then painting the weights. So you actually have a bunch of blend shapes, and then it morphs the character into that werewolf shape. Anyway. Okay, so those are some useful tools. We also have our nonlinear deformers. I'm not using that menu. So if we go to the create deformers, nonlinear, you have the bend, the flare, sine, squash, twist, and wave. So the twist, squash, and bend I actually use fairly frequently. The other ones, not so much. I suppose the sine would be really good if you were going to model a magic carpet or something. I don't know. I used it on Paperman for the sheet of paper as a rigging component. Do you use those kinds of deformers on humanoid characters much? You could. It depends what the show requires.